to start. Dave Folland was going to offer a brief intro. Go ahead.
Hey, if uh, excuse me just a sec. Ah, if you'll indulge me here, I want to read what Doug sent out about Bill because it was fairly concise. And there's a whole bunch we could say about him, but I'm afraid I'd leave something out if I just kind of speak off the top of my head. So first, I'll just talk about what he's going to talk about, but some of his background I think is really good to keep in mind, and probably all of you have read this, but hopefully having this fresh in our mind will be nice. But just home from a 700-mile bicycle climate ride, the Mighty Five, Bill will give his perspective on his advocacy experience from St. George to Moab and briefly share about his own transformation with CCL, 16 years of advocacy, and his intention to keep it fun, keep it engaging, and turn it into a lifelong practice. Bill will also share a quick update of CCL's current focus. But let me just go. Bill's got a diverse, wonderful background, and he came here as a ski patrolman, which I don't think was in here, but he's a Vermonter, father, carpenter by trade. He's been a small business owner, ski patrolman, Alta Town Marshal, created a renewable energy efficiency nonprofit, personally driven to walk his talk and to stand for what he believes. Bill stepped completely out of his comfort zone in 2010 to lobby in DC as a volunteer with Citizens Climate Lobby because of his daughter, his love of nature, and a deep-seated desire to help the U.S. become a leader in climate solutions. Bill founded the 12th chapter nationwide that year of CCL and is currently one of CCL's network directors supporting volunteers across the state. Over 16 years of climate advocacy, Bill has campaigned as a single-issue federal climate candidate 3 times and has completed over 10 CCL bipartisan climate advocacy tours across the Mountain West, and so far has biked over 5,000 miles promoting CCL climate solutions while raising $45,000. And I must say, I owe so much to Bill. I wouldn't be here if it weren't for Bill. I met Bill, 14 or so years ago, and he was just such a reasonable, inviting person. I got involved with CCL, and he welcomed me in, and I've never looked back. So I just really admire what you're doing, Bill. I'm just really looking forward to hearing your updates of your experiences and sharing with us. It's all yours, Bill.
Wonderful. Well, well, thank you for that kind introduction, Dave. Yeah, Dave, I used to say Dave and I are like ham and cheese when we worked together in CCL. We worked a lot together in the early years when we were starting with the Salt Lake City chapter. And so appreciate that kind introduction. And it's great to be here. I really appreciate the time you have allowed me to be here and to share about my experiences. And as Dave shared, I just in May I finished this 700 plus mile climate ride. I did the Mighty Five, and the idea was to visit the Mighty Five national parks of Utah. Really soaking in the beauty of our natural world while incorporating my advocacy into it, and also raising money for the organization. So it all really, the story of the tour kind of came from some friends who had supported a previous climate ride that I had done up in Montana and Wyoming a few years ago. And they called me this spring and said, we really enjoyed that climate ride you did, and maybe you ought to do another one. And then that was about all I needed to say, hey, wow, that's a great idea. And I also want to give a shout out to Dave Folland too, who supported the first climate ride that I did when I ran for U.S. Senate in 2012, opposing Orrin Hatch. Back then, no one was talking about climate change, and I chose to run for office as a way to bring attention to the issue, knowing that as a candidate, I had a greater opportunity for people wanting to know more about who I am and what I'm doing and why I'm doing it and what I'm advocating for. So I saw it as a really valuable tool to get out there and speak up and try to get more attention to the issue. And the same theme I think held for this ride that I did last month. And so I started with an event in St. George. That was an evening event, really leaning on volunteers that I had worked with in the past that are members of CCL, or people that I had connected through my climate advocacy, to help set up events along the way, so that as we all know, the more we have connections in communities, the better chance we have of people showing up and having people get invited and be a part of a community effort. And so started with an event in St. George that was also talking about the economics of clean energy. Rod Perry, who some of you may know, wrote a book on this recently here in Utah, and so he was one of the other participants in the first event in St. George. And then the riding started the next day, where I went to Springdale and did the Zion Canyon ride, where I invited folks to join me. I called every ride. I had a ride in every park as part of the tour. And so I would call those Grand Fondos, which is a theme for those who are cyclists may have heard of that style of ride, which is a one-day ride that is a group ride. And so I was trying to invite people to join me in the rides along the way. And then I rode through Kanab from Springdale, did a couple events in Kanab, rode up to Alton, where I had a conversation with a local there. That's actually where there had been a coal mine in that town, and I had a conversation with a resident there back in 2014 when I ran for Congress in the 2nd District, opposing Representative Stewart at the time. That person was sort of reluctant to, believe in climate. And we had a conversation that I followed up on when I did a tour in 2022 that passed through that town on my bicycle once again in Utah, where we met again, sat down and had a conversation. And in the end, he said to me that, really the way we look at things, we're not as far apart as you may think we are. And, that was really amazing to me to see that transition in that person's perspective on energy and climate. Fast forward to this year, I passed through there again and had another conversation with him where he started out by saying he had purchased an EV and he was adding more solar panels to his house, and he wanted to get himself off the grid entirely. So it was really fun to see that sort of transition and conversation. I continued on riding to Panguitch. I had a couple events there. Moved through Bryce, rode through Bryce, and then on to Escalante. Along the way, I had 15 events where I had volunteers or people I'd worked with in the past. I had much greater success than trying to just have a cold call type event in the towns that I passed through. But from Escalante, went on to Boulder, had an event there, then rode to Torrey, had another event, then rode through Capitol Reef, then on to near Hanksville, where there's a dirt road that heads up along the San Rafael Swell, ending up in Goblin Valley, passing through a really strong windstorm, dust storm, which made it interesting riding for sure. Stopped in Goblin Valley, then on to Green River, had a event at the John Wesley Powell Museum, and then rode on to Island in the Sky in Canyonlands out to Grandview Point, and looked down at the White Rim, which is where I was going to be riding 2 days later as part of this tour as well. Camped up on Island in the Sky area, and then rode into Moab, where I had a ride into Arches National Park, and then into Moab for the final conversation and event that we had in Moab. And so I have actually a little slideshow of photos, which will kind of just give you a little sense of the tour. So if it's all right with you, I'll share this, and it looks like I have sharing capacity here. So I'll just do this so you can get a bit of the experience of the tour. So that was just a quick slideshow there. And the way I had it set up was because I had vehicle support, I had a mountain bike with me and my road bike. So I rode the road bike most of the time, except for the dirt section from Hanksville up to Goblin Valley. And then also I rode the White Rim on the last day, which is, some of you may know, is a Jeep road that passes through Canyonlands down on as you drop down off the rim of the Island in the Sky. What I found was my strongest audiences there was really no surprise. The audiences that were most interested, I found in Kanab. I found it in Torrey, well, Boulder as well, Torrey and Moab. And then where the other stops that I made along the way, I found that, the attendance was low there. But, the goal of the trip was to really try to reach out in every town that I stopped in along the way. I feel that it's really important to get out into the world and put it out there and talk about the issues that are important. And it certainly succeeded in that effort. Certainly it would have been nice to have a stronger turnout in places, but really grateful for the support where I got it. In my description, I talked about what I try to do is I'm really trying to turn advocacy into a lifetime practice, sort of like yoga. And when I first got involved with CCL, we were specifically focused on carbon pricing, And, I had this belief, I think a naive belief, that all we need to do is pass carbon pricing and boom, 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 I'm done. We can get back to living the life that I was living, which was, outdoor oriented and, just really enjoying the beautiful world that we live in. And what I realized was over the time that I've been involved with the organization is that, you know, even if we had passed carbon pricing, and I still believe we will pass carbon pricing, there's still advocacy that needs to be done. It could be defending the legislation that we pass. It could be addressing other issues that crop up around the climate issue. And so it was sort of a realization to me that, the advocacy work is something that really is ideally something that I can do for the long haul. And so, how do I do that for the long haul? And what I have tried to do is figure out ways to have fun while I'm doing the advocacy work. And so, I incorporate tours like this from time to time as a way to do that. I've done a number of tours across the Mountain West by vehicle as well, but just to be able to, I like to say, pedal for a purpose, where I get to incorporate my passion for cycling with the belief and how important it is to stand for what I believe in. And when I talk about my transformation, when I first went to DC in 2010 to lobby, and it was sort of, it was really a transformational experience for me where I came to DC very intimidated, feeling like politicians were bigger than me somehow, and that I was just this little piddly person. And I was terrified of lobbying. And this was back when, the CCL we had 25 people come from across the country that year that I went in 2010. So small team, dedicated, passionate. My first meeting was actually Senator Hatch's office. We met with staff there, big boardroom, tons of leather seats. And, I remember looking at my notes, and I was shaking so much that I couldn't even read what it said on the paper. And yet I walked out of that meeting, and I remember being in the hallway and thinking to myself, this is just exactly the kind of thing that we need to be doing, is to have citizens engaging in the political process, going to DC not as tourists. Well, they can be tourists too, but to take some time to be advocates too, and to use your power as a constituent to speak up. And so that sort of led me on this path of advocacy that has been very meaningful for me over the years. Like I said, Dave joined the Salt Lake City chapter. Dave Fallon joined the Salt Lake City chapter, not like, I don't know, 8 months after I had set it up. And, it just, what I found is that not just the value of the advocacy and the transformational experience that I've had personally, but also really connecting with amazing, special people who are also dedicated, who are also working together to try to address these issues that we face. And so it's really a powerful experience for me to realize, that anybody can go to DC and speak up and have an impact, and to be able to find people through CCL that are, also believe in the approach that CCL has of communicating and working with respect and appreciation, focused on building relationships and really holding optimism for what's possible. And that's something that I still really try to lean on when I work with volunteers and CCL in my role as network director, is to really try to convey how important it is to hold space for what's possible. Times are tough. Advocacy is hard. But if you don't believe anything's possible and it's discouraging, it's self-limiting. And so I really try to maintain a level of optimism in the work, because I think it's really important to hold that space. And it's been very rewarding for me in that area. And Dave Reiser asked me to share a little bit about what CCL is focused on right now. And probably all of you know this already, but we are working on advancing permitting reform, and that's trying to open up the permitting process and speed it up so that we can get large energy projects online, and then being able to transmit the energy across the country in a more effective way, which would allow for more durability in the power grid. And it would also, as CCL goes, we are a nonpartisan organization. So when we advocate for transmission reform, we can't specifically say it's for permitting reform for clean energy only. And that's sometimes a tough message to share with some advocates. But the way CCL looks at it is that, a high percentage of the projects that are being built and developed are clean energy projects already. And it's only going to become more and more so because the cost of clean energy, wind, solar, battery storage is less expensive than fossil fuels. So we're really heading in the right direction anyway, and it's just trying to find ways to, speed up the process. And so that's sort of the area that we've been focusing on as our primary ask. We also have been advocating for the Fix Our Forest Act, which is a bill that Senator Curtis has sponsored, and that has to do with managing forests and creating opportunities to address the chances for large forest fires, being able to limit them through forest management. So those are the areas that CCL is focused on right now. And I think Dave said I should talk for 15 minutes, and I've already talked for more than that. And so I'd love to open it up for questions that anyone has, or if you'd like me to cover anything about other experiences that I've had, I'm happy to share. And again, just very grateful for the opportunity to meet with you all. I have been appreciating and enjoying the LDS Action Team from afar, and I appreciate the great work that all of you have been doing, including the event that you actually had with Senator Curtis just what was it, a couple months ago, I think. So anyway, grateful to be here and happy to answer any questions.
Bill, just one comment. I felt like I was going through home movies there, since I was raised at Zion and born in Kanab and all that area. And I've been in those mines in Alice. So it crossed my mind, though, when you're talking about sometimes how the groups you're speaking to are small, and we refer to that, I think, as speaking to the choir. But I think the choir needs those. We get sometimes disappointed because all we have is the choir, but the choir needs reinforcing all the time. And so when somebody like you comes in, we, the choir, that helps us, rejuvenates us, and the choir's more apt to go out and tell their friends about what you said than the people that aren't the choir. So, way to go, and thanks for doing that.
Oh, thanks so much, Phil. I appreciate that. And, I did, for what it's worth, I also really looked forward to having conversations with the people that aren't in the choir. And that was something that I had really hoped for in some of the towns that I passed, in particular, Panguitch. Panguitch was a town that I had passed through in a previous tour where I took a beating from the local there who really didn't believe that climate change was a concern. And I really was looking forward to having conversations with them, really talking about, in those audiences where they may be deniers of climate. And I think that the economic message is so strong now that what I was really wanting to do was to, test my chops on being able to talk about the economic opportunities that come from transitioning to clean energy, and really trying to share the message that in the end, you can believe climate change or not, but in the end, the economics, do you want to pay more for your energy or less for your energy? And the demand is there. So that was what I had hoped to be talking about. And the friends that set up the event in Panguitch, they felt like they couldn't even say climate discussion on the marquee at the Gem Theater, which is where I had the event. So they called it a water discussion. And what a surprise, one person showed up. So anyway, that's the way it goes. And I just think that, it's I love getting out there and just putting myself out there and having conversations. And even if they're hard, really just trying to be sure that the message is still being put out there, and really trying to look at these types of experiences as, I can't control how other people see things or believe things, but I can control what I can do. And to be able to, put myself out there in this way is something that I think is really rewarding, and created an opportunity to be out there. So thank you, Phil, for your kind words. And yeah, it was a interesting experience across the board.
So I love the slideshow. I saw you on the bike, but it looked like there were others on bike too. Were there others that rode with you throughout, or how did that work?
Yeah, so thanks for asking that. And I should have clarified a little more. So I did every time I did a ride in the national parks along the way. So every national park I did either the scenic, every scenic drive that they had in every park along the way. So in Zion Narrows, I had friends that joined me, including the friends who supported the ride. So we rode Zion Narrows together. That was the group of 6 or 7 folks there. And then when I rode up Johnson Canyon from Kanab towards um, Alton, I had some friends that I had worked with in the ski industry 36 years ago, who joined me, who came up from Flagstaff and rode with me for 10 miles or so. And then I did, even though I advertised that I wanted to invite people to join me on rides in all the parks, I rode Bryce out to the end and back solo there. And then I rode the Arches National Park scenic road. I rode that with Tom Moyer and Lauren Barros, who some of you know, who are CCLers, as well as my girlfriend Alex joined me on that section. And then, to my surprise, an old friend of mine of 36 years, Trish Murphy, joined me for the White Rim ride, and she's an old friend that I worked with in Alta many years ago, and she joined on that last ride of the tour. So I had some fun connections with some old friends, and a few new ones that joined in the ride. But the intent was to try to have at least invite people to join me on a ride in every national park at least, and anyone was welcome to join in any of the other sections. But in the end, those were the areas that people rode with me, and it was really fun to get to spend some time with some old friends and some new friends along the way.
Bill, just one question for you, I guess, in retrospect now, looking back on some of these you've done, what would you do differently to get more people involved? Have you been able to identify any particular things?
I mean, to me, what I tend to find is what it boils down to is who in the area that you're going, and who can help get the word out. Because if you don't have that, you really don't have a way to connect with the community. If I had more bandwidth, or if I had someone who could help me. I could have advertised more than I was able to. I had volunteers that advertised for the event in Moab, for instance, and did advertising in Springdale and in Kanab. Um, you know, Also what is works well is coordinating with events that are happening already. So the Kanab stop was part of their Amazing Earth Fest, and so I was invited to be a guest speaker at that Amazing Earth Fest, and that turned out to create a good audience. Um, I had What was really nice too was with the people that I did have connections with, they helped so that I was able to have a um, city council member from St. George attended a couple of events that I had, one in Springdale and one in St. George. Also, the mayor of Torrey attended the event that I had in Torrey. So nice to get some elected officials there too. But to your question, Phil, um, it's pretty hard if you don't have local folks that can help get the word out for you. So certainly advertising would help, I would think, but it's again, I think it boils down to the relationships, and if you have people in communities that have relationships with people in that community, that's really the best way to get people there. Um, but I think it's also the way, especially when I'm doing a tour by bike, you kind of have to determine how much you can ride in a day. And so that really decides where you're going to end up each day. And my goal was to try to do something in every town, regardless of, you know, what, how big of an audience there might be, but just to put it out there and, be open to possibility. So we even had an event that got approved at the Goblin Valley State Park. They have an amphitheater there, so we advertised for an event there. Not a real surprise that no one showed up for that one, but the goal was to be sure that we did at least put it out there that we had these opportunities every day.
So Bill, thank you. You're such an inspiration, and you're also such a help. We wouldn't be having these meetings if Bill didn't keep our Zoom stuff going. But I have a question. When were you at Alta?
I came to Alta in 1990, and essentially I worked in Alta for 10 years and lived there.
So so you were there with Kate Black
Yep,
and
John Goldner.
John Goldner.
Yep,
So
Mayor Levitt. Yep.
so I was up there. I was the one that I was up there from about 75 on to 2000. I'm the one that did all took care ran the water system at Snowbird and Alta and did the tunnel project. I did the Wasatch Drain Tunnel project and the Bay City project. We probably bumped into each other.
I wouldn't be surprised. I remember doing that tour with you um,
Yeah,
at the down at Snowbird, and
yeah.
certainly I love hearing the story of you um, walking through the mines and how you ended up getting the job there. That's a incredible
That's what
story in
made me an
itself.
environmentalist. was was wrecking the environment turned me into an environmentalist. But yeah, I okay, yeah. And Trish Murphy, is that Trish Murphy Cone that
Yeah. Uh-huh.
she lives in? I know her. She lives in Oakley.
Yep. Exactly. Yeah, Trish worked at the Shallow Shaft way back in the early times when I was there.
Oh,
Um,
okay.
and she's been a friend for a long time, and she's really into biking now, and it was really
Yeah.
fun to have her join
Oh
for
God,
sure.
we've been closer than I ever realized.
Bill, can you talk for just a couple of minutes? I'm sorry, Dave, you had one too, but about the nonprofit, the renewable energy efficiency nonprofit. Just what's that about?
Yeah, so after I left Alta, well, actually, while I was still at Alta, I had this dream of creating my own business, which was an art gallery and picture frame shop. And so the idea was to frame my own landscape photography. And, I was young and thought I could just frame my own artwork and be successful and go outdoors and enjoy it and take pictures along the way. And reality uh, changed that ideal. And I ran an art gallery and frame shop in Sugar House after initially starting it in Alta, and did that for 7 years. The economy turned. That was 2008. My business didn't survive, and I wanted to figure out a way that I could give back to nature for all it's given me. Especially at that time, my daughter was born in 2003, and really wanted to find a way to contribute that way. And so I had the idea that I would create renewable energy resources with the name of the nonprofit. And it was intended to facilitate ways for individuals to become more energy efficient and utilize renewable energy. And so I set up and got 501c3 status. And in the process of getting that, 501c3 set up, I became more and more drawn to really thinking about how the climate issue is so big that helping individuals is really valuable and needed. But I really wanted to figure out if I'm going to put my energy in, I wanted to think of ways that I could do that would have the greatest impact. And I happened to be in the starting of my nonprofit. I was doing talks at the downtown Salt Lake City Library. And every time I did a talk, I did them once a month. And each time I found myself migrating more and more towards systemic solutions rather than, trying to help individuals. And I did a presentation that was comparing cap and trade with carbon pricing as a way to reduce carbon emissions. And I did a Google search, Citizens Climate Lobby came up, and I just did an inquiry there. And the founder, Marshall Saunders, called me the next day. And, basically from that point on, I learned more about Citizens Climate Lobby. He asked me to go to DC to lobby, and I realized if I was going to speak up and stand up for what I believed in, I had to go for my own, self-worth, I think. And in the process of learning about CCL and carbon pricing, I just decided that my energies would be better served by working with Citizens Climate Lobby, advocating for systemic solutions rather than creating a nonprofit that would help individuals with energy efficiency. And so I basically just shelved my own nonprofit and went all in on Citizens Climate Lobby back in 2010.
Say, Bill, you went to some of the more conservative parts of the state, and you've done that over 14 years. You mentioned this one fellow who, with your conversation, it kind of changed with time. Just overall, the sense, the feeling you got from some of these more conservative areas, has that changed at all in 14 years?
That's a great question, Dave, and that's been something that I've wanted to answer myself in person. And I would say that um, this area that I rode, I wrote it as a candidate in 2012, 2014, and 2016. And then I rode the same area in 2022 on a tour, a climate advocacy tour, and then this year. And I think that my feeling is that definitely there is more of an acknowledgement of the issue and the need to address the problem. With sort of, I would say, this time around, I think that people are beat down by the politics in the world today. And so I felt like, there was a bit of a stall in progress, because what I found happening this time around was it felt, and this is coming from, more left-leaning audiences, was the conversation was more partisan than I've experienced, where it was a lot of, us and them, they're wrong, and not enough of we, trying to, bring us all together. And so, so I think there's been a bit of a, like a reverse bump on progress a little bit right now. But I think that it, for me, just points to how important it is to just, keep on keeping on and talking with everybody, and really trying to be the bridge in the issues that we're facing. And so, long story short, I think that over the years there has been forward movement on accepting of the changes that are happening and acknowledging the changes and talking about solutions, with, just a little bit of a pause right now, just because I think that the political environment has become so partisan for both parties that it just makes it a little tougher to have these conversations. And I was really trying to stress how important it is that we work on, finding solutions together, and to not demonize the other side, but rather appreciate the things that they are doing, and continuing on in the conversation.
Bill, what about, I mean, as you went around, was there an LDS connection to those groups at all? Could you address that a little bit?
Well, I'm sure.
Hey, Bill, I've got to take off. Thank you so much.
See you,
for
Doug.
Hey,
everything.
Hey,
no
Doug.
worries. Thank you, Doug. Good to see you. Alta partner.
Yes.
I'm sure there were a number of people that were LDS that were in audiences that I had along the way, but not any like specific conversations, in that vein, as far as, talking about stewardship, for instance, with LDS folks. And so, maybe that's for a future tour, maybe that's something to explore, is to try to connect with the LDS community more directly through, events directly with church members.
Yeah, the reason I asked, I mean, I managed the Arches and Canyonlands area for 9 years, and San Juan County is about as anti-Fed as you could get, and anti-Fed translates into anti-environment, and it goes right down that line, but very pro-LDS. And I found, by looking hard at the LDS, not going in and saying, hey, I'm a member, I'm better than the other guy, but to subtly make those connections, I got 5 seconds more of listening. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
And I found too that sometimes the terminology worked against us. I could go in and I could talk to a rancher about how the weather was changing, and he would agree. And he would tell me all the things that he saw. He saw it in his crops, he saw it in the weather and stuff. But if I had started out by saying climate change, he would have, locked the door. And so I just have wondered over the last few years, particularly, if our message could do some subtlety to it, where we could open up things maybe a little bit more through different terminology. And we're an LDS group, somehow making that known, so we get that extra 5 seconds.
I think that's a great way to look at it. You know, that extra 5 seconds, it's a great way to kind of frame the potential of really shifting that, because that 5 seconds could make a huge difference of just creating an opening. And I kind of felt that, you know, when I had that conversation with the local in Alton, I really, you know, what I found was, you know, the first interaction I had with him in 2014, it was very, you know, it was his arms were crossed, my arms were crossed. We were having a conversation. I was kind of embarrassed that my arms were crossed because that seems like a defensive posture, or something to that effect. And you know, fast forward to 2022 when I met with him, and we actually had an opportunity to sit down and have a conversation. And there was a lot of, you know, I was kind of um, nervous about what that was going to be like. And what ended up happening is, you know, it was a little uncomfortable at first, but you know, in a way, I got that extra 5 seconds. In this case, it was, you know, an hour-long conversation in his front yard. But the point being that if you actually have the time to have a deeper, or you know, a little bit more of a conversation where you get to know each other a little better, and the people that you're meeting with are heard and they feel heard, it creates openings that are really positive, and I think that's what led to a really good experience in the end. So I think that's a great uh, thing to consider, and maybe that's something for the next tour. We should try to figure out how to do it with, you know, the community that maybe the LDS action team can help with to connect with folks and try to get that extra 5 seconds.
Excellent. So we're almost to the end of our hour. Time for maybe one more question. Anybody have one? I've got one last question then. So your role at CCL is now the network director?
Correct. Uh-huh.
What the heck is that?
It's the director of the network. Um, so like my original role was as a volunteer. I was regional coordinator for the Mountain West. Then the position became titled regional director for the Mountain West. And then, as you may have heard or have seen, in January of 2025, CCL downsized in staff, you know, primarily, well, for financial reasons. And so all the regional coordinators um, were let go. And then there were a few that were kept on, but then were given a much larger portion of the country to support. And so I went from supporting 7 states in the Mountain West, so Montana, Wyoming, Utah, Colorado, New Mexico, Arizona, and Nevada. And then in January of last year, I was assigned the entire West Coast. So now I have California, Oregon, Washington, Alaska, Hawaii. And then I also was assigned North Dakota, South Dakota, Nebraska. And then there's another network director that covers the East Coast. And then we have two other staff members that cover a smaller portion of states that have another role that they play in the organization. So basically, network director has been designed to support a larger part of the country, and we rely more on volunteers to help. And we work with state coordinators in all of our states, and you know, we have to rely a lot on volunteers to help get the information out. So we work a lot more with state coordinators and provide them the resources and information to provide the support to the chapters and volunteers in their specific states. And so I am sort of the support member on staff for the 16 states that I track now. And that's the network director role.
Got it.
Wow.
That's great. Thank you for that.
Of course.
Thanks for your work, Bill.
Yeah.
Oh, thank you. I appreciate it. It's it's changed my life. And I love the things that CCL has taught me. It's it's really helped me just, I think, become a better person and really be better at listening, and understanding, and just the importance of coming together and really building relationships. And so it's been very rewarding for me to do this work, not just on a professional level, but on a personal level. And again, just really appreciate all of you and all that you're doing. I know that we're all working in this on the same things in the same direction, and it takes a village, and you are a great village to be involved with.